back. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
And you're listening to Boomer Life on CIL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton, and today the conversation is about the journey of dementia. Our guests today are from the Alzheimer's Society of BC. CEO Maria Howard is on the phone with us today, and we'd also like you to meet Michelle McCabe. Michelle is the manager of programs and services for the Alzheimer's Society of BC. She works with an excellent team, I understand, to help develop and implement a variety of support services for families that are living with dementia around the province. And programs like First Link, which we have just touched base on when we heard David's story. So, Michelle, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
What can you tell us from your perspective about First Link? We've heard sort of firsthand. We heard a little bit from Maria. We've also heard from David how it benefited him. It's a program it's like your baby. Tell us a little bit about it.
So David put it so eloquently how when he was seeing his doctor and his doctor identified that he was living with a form of dementia, he made a referral to the Alzheimer's Society. And David just said himself, it was so great because they phoned us. And that's what we found often with people who are living with Alzheimer's and dementia. It's a challenging disease to live with, as David so eloquently said. It's also a challenging disease to reach out and ask for help. So that's one of the wonderful things about First Link is that through your doctor you can get connected and somebody will make an outreach call to you. Now what we learned from that was that we wanted to make it easy for anyone around the province to connect with us in multiple ways. So we also have the First Link Dementia Helpline, and I'll just give that number. It's 1-800-936-6033. Anyone anywhere in the province can call us and get connected to our whole host of support services. So some of the services that David was talking about, for example.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but through conversation I'm hearing that getting a diagnosis of Alzheimer's it's almost like you've lost someone, and you might experience similar symptoms to grief. David expressed a sense of denial, like it can't be me, and God help me, and where do I go, and what does this all mean? And it's like being hit with a truck. You're just completely overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. So I like the fact that the Alzheimer's Society reaches out, and you're the ones that contact them. What other kinds of services do you offer?
So David mentioned that he has a group he goes to twice a month, and those are our support groups. And so they're for people like himself who are in the early stages of the disease. And David was talking about how meaningful it is because he can get together with his peers and talk about this fear he's experiencing, or talk about how he's managing strategies he's developing to live well with the disease. And then at the same time, we have support groups for care partners, so spouses of friends, family members, so they can also go and learn about the disease. You're absolutely right, Joanne, when you say there's a huge amount of lack of knowledge, I would say, in the public around this disease. So when people get diagnosed, like David, like anyone, they first want to learn. And so we really encourage people to do that. As David was saying, the more you understand the changes that are going on, the better that you can manage them.
Sure, education is power, right? Did you feel that once you started
very
attending
much
the support
so. I
groups?
think there is this sense in the group meetings of we're all in this together, and everybody's story is a little bit different. Everybody is struggling a bit with some aspect, but there's a lot of support there. We listen to each other and we connect, and that makes a big difference.
So how do you encourage people to participate in the programs? Because if it's hard to get them to make that initial contact to the Alzheimer's Society is why you reach out to them. How do you encourage participation?
And that's a very good question. There are people like David who sounds like he was an early adopter and he came along. There are a lot of people who have resistance. I don't know if I'm going to fit in. Is it going to be for me? So that's one of the reasons that we created this. When you come to us, whether on your own or through a doctor referral, we have regular ongoing contact with you. And that's a way of slowly, gently encouraging people to participate. And that could be in one-to-one support, that could be in support groups like David's describing. We also have a whole range of education workshops for people from the earliest stages all the way to end of life education.
So I've spent a little bit of time on your website, alzheimerbc.org, and I've noticed that you have other programs. One is called Minds in Motion, one is called Shaping the Journey, and as well as the early stage support groups. What can you tell us about some of the other programs?
Yes, so those are our early programs. So the ones that David's accessed, like David, for example, was mentioning to me that he went to Shaping the Journey, which is an education workshop for the person with the diagnosis and a family member or friend. And then we have what we call the family caregiver education, which is really kind of our comprehensive education that explains what the disease is, how it causes people to experience changes, maybe in their mood, in their behavior, their ability to remember. And so we're helping people to learn about the disease so that they can live well with it.
And what kind of educators administer these programs? Like, do you actually do the administration yourself, or?
I did used to work right on the front lines giving the support calls and teaching the education workshops. I don't do that now. So we have a whole host of support and education coordinators and FirstLink coordinators who provide this support to families. So for example, when David gets that call, that would be one of our FirstLink coordinators reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember her very well. I want to mention that it was a very good reception.
Yeah, and just trying to, validate what the person is experiencing, because for any of us this would be shocking, right? So, someone that you can talk to who would understand, who can validate, and then offer you some possible strategies or programs.
Yep.
So let me just reiterate the significance of that statement from David, because David had just mentioned to us he doesn't remember what he did yesterday. Mm-hmm. So for someone from that program to have that much of an impact on an Alzheimer's patient that you said, I remember that person, that contact very well, that has a lot of weight to it.
It does.
It does. Mm-hmm. What else do you want to tell us about the programs and services that are offered through the Alzheimer's Society of BC?
Well, I think, again, I'd like to reiterate, I'm going back to David, because David, you said so many things so well.
It's such a great story.
Such a great story, but that, our programs are there to support people as they're moving through the different stages of the disease. So if you're in the early stage, there's programs like the other one that I was going to talk about is Minds in Motion. It's a social and recreation program for people who are in the early stages of the disease. What we know about the disease is that people tend to feel isolated. The disease will kind of challenge you to stay at home and be isolated. So we're always encouraging people, get out in the community, exercise, engage, keep that social connection. And I think the other thing I'd like to say is what David said too, was that meeting others when you go out to the programs who are living a similar life to the one you're experiencing.
So you must be able to take away some great information for yourself that's helpful to you by meeting others that are in the same situation.
It's helpful in many ways. I think the main piece for me is, although we're all around the table and we all have been diagnosed, everybody's story is a little bit different. There's a certain amount of struggling going on for most of us at some time or another. And the great thing about it is when I talk about this is going on for me and it's not working very well, there's a bunch of people sitting there who totally get it, because they'll have to have experienced something like that. Mm-hmm. And it can be very, very helpful. Just to they get it.
It's a lot of hand-holding as well, but they also might be able to recommend a situation saying, oh, well, that happened to me about 6 months ago, and here's what I did to get around it. Or
that does happen.
It does happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. And in some of our education workshops, we share with people strategies for the changes that they're noticing in their communication, the changes they're noticing in their behavior. We try to get them connected to other services available in the community. For example, services about financial and health planning, So there's a whole host of information there for people that is really beneficial.
And do all these programs take place at the main center, the resource center?
They mainly, you can find out about them through the resource center. Sometimes we rent other spaces in the community. Another important thing I probably should say is that we have 15 resource centers around the province.
Oh yeah, very important.
So people can phone the Dementia Helpline. They can get connected to the resources in their area, so all parts of the province.
What do you like most about the job that you do with the Alzheimer's Society of BC?
I think for all of us it's pretty inspiring when we get to see people who are accessing our programs and who are connecting with others and benefiting from it, and that we're reaching more people all the time.
So the fact that you've got this expansion and now being able to open a resource center in Surrey, it just extends.
Exactly. Able to reach the demands, and as Maria said in the beginning, age is the number one factor for this disease, and as we all know, the baby boomers are aging, so the numbers are growing, so we're always trying to create more programs to support the families living with the disease.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to do a little round table here. There's 4 of us in the studio. Maria's on the phone is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hands up in this room. How many of you have a personal connection to Alzheimer's disease or dementia? Every single hand is up. Maria, I know you've got both in the air. That's excellent. Michelle, thank you very much for joining us. Very informative. Do you want to give out the helpline phone number?
Yes, I will. One more time. It's 1-800-936-6033, Monday to Friday, 9 to 4.
Thanks again, Michelle McCabe, the Manager of Programs and Services with the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. Still a lot more to come. Don't run away. We're going to talk next about some of the fun in fundraising. That's up next on Boomer Life on CL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.